certainly fascinating, right? Because performance improvement plans, most certainly have an intent. Data showed absolutely the opposite thing, and it was an exit tool. Actually, I don't think that there is a model of HR. And I beg anybody who's in HR to please reassess, to, look and understand that rules-based HR and all of those fundamental things do not create healthy organizations.
Welcome back to the Leadership Puzzle. I'm your host, Jeff Lupinacci, coming from Birmingham, Alabama. And today we're diving into one of the most important conversations happening in the field of HR today. And that's, how does HR need to reinvent itself to be a value-added partner to the CEO and C-suite? And my guest is someone I have been looking forward to having a conversation with for a while, Linde Grindle. She is a strategic HR and business leader who brings that rare combination of operational depth, executive insights, and practical experience driving real organization transformation. Today, we're going to talk about what strategic HR really looks like, how to earn the right to sit at the big kids table, and you're gonna learn a ton about what that looks like. And so if you're an HR leader, an aspiring executive, or someone who's simply curious about the future of our profession, this is a conversation you don't want to miss. All right, well, Linde, welcome to the Leadership Puzzle. I've been waiting for our conversation.
I'm super excited to be here, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I think it was serendipitous how we met. I had, I had posted what I thought was a puff piece on HR needing to change its name, and it struck a chord with not just HR professionals, but like a lot of people. And one of those individuals was you, and you made a comment, and I happened to reach out, not expecting that you would reply, but you did. And every time we talk now, it's like we've been long lost friends, and I really appreciate
Absolutely.
that. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. It's actually these are just great stories when you know that two people are meant to be together, because I have to say that I actually don't do a lot of commenting on on LinkedIn. But it was a post that struck me, and you messaged me, and I went with it. And so those are the times when you know it's meant to be, when
yeah.
you just go with it, and the connection is where it's supposed to be. So
Well, I'm so glad you did, and we really have spent a lot of time talking about how HR is in a moment of, we'll call it reinvention. I mean,
yeah.
from your perspective, what do you think is driving this? I'm going to call it an urgency, if you listen to all the pundits out there, to
Yeah.
reshape itself to be this value added leader.
Yeah, I actually think the urgency's been there for more than a decade.
Yeah.
And now the urgency's whatever is bigger than an urgency, because now business is kind of sharing in that urgency, with its own, kind of complexity and its own, kind of moment, where if it doesn't change, then, something's going to break. And so the problem with HR is we need to evolve, and there is such a history, and so much complexity in that history, and the way in which we fit in with business structure has a lot of complexity. And there's just so much dialogue around that.
Yeah.
And I think everybody, you know, I don't know if it's my LinkedIn algorithm, but I feel like that's all that's on my LinkedIn is, kind of what is the answer. And I really don't think that there is one answer, but the reason why that urgency is right now is because business needs to change and um, HR needs to evolve so much that if we don't kind of change what we've needed to change over the last decade, we're going to really be, not in the right position to be there for the business.
Yeah. Well, I mean, gosh, HR, it's almost 100 years old. If you think you go all the way
Yeah,
back to the Hawthorne um, studies and whatnot on human behavior and whatnot
crazy.
in manufacturing.
Yeah,
But and you said it right. It's like, gosh, there's been an urgency for a dozen years that
yeah.
the HR has to figure out how to get to that. Uh, they call it the seat at the table, earn that invitation, whatever you want to use. Now you've done that. You've been able to
Yeah, yeah.
successfully be,
Yep,
big at the
absolutely.
big kids table, if you will. Um,
Yep.
Talk us through what you've been able to do to help ensure that the C-suite sees you and HR as this value-added partner to the business.
I see myself as the business. I don't see myself as an add-on function. I participate as part of the strategy as the business, fully integrated, and that's how I encourage my team to um, act and behave as well. And I think I try to change the dialogue. Actually, this whole word, the business, is a really interesting
Hmm.
topic for me.
Okay.
And I talk to my HR team about that all the time. Talking about the business like it's something so separate and opposite from us, and that it's an entity that, you know, we are in support of or in attachment to. We are the business. And that's how I operate with the C-suite or as part of the C-suite. And when I, am part of an organization, I am at every level. I've always worked in organizations that have a very large frontline contingency, very large operation in the front line, and I love that. I love connecting a very front line, a large frontline contingency
Sure.
all the way from, that front line up to the top and everything in between. And, being part of that organization. And, I know so many HR people who do that, who live and breathe that, who are the most intelligent people in the business and who could sit at that table and, talk about what's happening in the business in the most intelligent place. In so many ways, we are so well positioned. We just have to be better at talking about ourselves um, in a way that helps people see us as we are them. We are not, something separate from them.
Yeah. Now, I mean, you bring up a really good point. I mean, I have worked with some of the most incredible leaders in HR that are some of the smartest people. What you know, why do you think is there one or two things that HR professionals who might be watching that you can go,
Yeah.
look, if you're not doing this or this, you're missing out on being seen as this strategic leader for the organization.
If you're not, if you're sitting at the table and, um, here's what I say. We talk all the time about the seat at the table, which I think is such an old, worn out actual conversation.
Seat at the Zoom.
The seat at the table or whatever. I mean, like if at this point, honestly, I think even CEOs who aren't kind of totally bought in to HR are kind of reserving a seat for HR, because they know that they kind of have to. They have HR. It's really about how is that seat being used. And, there's two parts of that. It's, how is the CEO kind of allowing you, opening the door for it to be used, and or how is the HR person in that seat using it. And, so let's talk about if you're that HR person. If you're that HR person and you're in that seat and, you have an opportunity to use your voice, and you're using your voice to talk about core HR process, engagement surveys, all of the things that, of course, we need to talk about and we need to inform about. That's great, but you need to be curious and engage in the business conversation that's happening at that table. If the COO is, providing an update on operational metrics and something strikes that it has a people strategy component, as a CHRO, you need to lean in and participate in that, or say, hey, let's have a discussion about that, or I think this is an opportunity for this. Those are areas that, you need to be fully engaged in a dialogue at the executive table or at whatever level table, not just around the core function giving updates about, the HR practice. You need to be talking about the rhythm of the business, and contributing to the strategy and how the business works.
Well, I think you hit something that I want to maybe take to another level. You said, if you're listening to the COO and they're talking about something that has a people component, you need to be able to have a voice. I might say that whether it has a people component or not, the best HR leaders are going to understand how money's made, understand
Absolutely.
the core of the business, what you're trying to accomplish,
Absolutely.
and can lean into that even if it
Absolutely.
doesn't have a people component.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I actually, and, really, really, really lean into, business acumen with my whole HR function. And, those little triggers with how, not just how the business makes money, but how you drive value, how you connect the dots between how something's running, the cost of something, what's happening in the market, those little things, how, someone in, a people function or whatever function it is, if you're someone who, is there at that table connecting the dots, connect those dots and bring it to that table. Be that one to do that.
Yeah. Hey everyone, Jeff here. Just a quick break to tell you who is actually behind the leadership puzzle. Well, if you've been listening for a while, you know I'm all about finding the unique capability puzzle pieces that develop great leaders. Well, that's exactly what we do at Evolve HR Solutions, our sponsor, but on an organizational level. You see, we're all talent strategists who specialize in finding that perfect talent puzzle piece for your HR, operations, supply chain, and commercial leadership roles. So what makes us different than the other agencies? Well, we dive deeper. We focus on the real cultural alignment and long-term fit, because the resume only tells part of the story. We do it all with a personalized, hands-on approach that makes the process feel a lot more human. So, if you need to find that perfect leader to complete your leadership team puzzle, well, check us out at evolvehrs.com. That's evolvehrs.com. All right, let's get back to the episode. Well, it's interesting because over my career, I can't tell you how many HR professionals like, gosh, I just need finance 101. I just need to understand how to read a P&L and what is EBITDA again, and
Yeah.
and it's like those are foundational
Yeah.
things that modern HR leaders need to go and go take a LinkedIn course. I mean, there's
Yeah.
go
So
on YouTube. There's plenty of resources out there to learn some of those basics.
so easy. And I mean, I'm going to tell you, you can go on to ChatGPT and you can say, explain EBITDA to me like I'm a fifth grader or I'm a kindergartner, and ChatGPT will explain it to you in that
Well,
way. I
well,
mean, I'm serious. Like the ways
yeah,
to learn things these days are so easy.
yeah.
And I mean, literally, I mean, it's because sometimes it's complex to learn them, but we have tools to learn things now that, can translate things. I mean, I don't mean to say that everybody needs things really dumbed down for them, but,
Sometimes they do.
we just really need to learn it, lean into it, and it just helps to help, going back to give you that extra little thing to connect those dots and to strengthen your power of your seat at the table.
Yeah, I mean, I remember sitting down with a COO candidate. We were bringing on a new COO, and I started talking to him about variance analysis of the manufacturing costs and the standard costing, uh, Lean Six and value stream mapping, and
Yeah,
he looked at me and was like, "Are you HR really?"
yeah,
And he told me after the fact that he selected our company because they had an HR team that actually understand how the business ran.
yeah,
And
huge. That's huge. Well, and I mean, one of the things, about HR is we are human behavior experts.
yeah, we should be.
And
Yeah.
one of the most fascinating ways in which that translates is understanding consumer behavior.
Mm.
And one of the things that I have become really passionate about is connecting that kind of internal people behavior, team member behavior to external market consumer behavior. And I mean, that's just a powerhouse concept for companies today. And
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
our impact on that, and an HR team being really smart about that and working with the marketing team and the finance team and triangulating that internally. And HR can be the true driver analytically, um, to be able to find the levers in an organization to really drive value.
I love that. I hadn't explicitly thought, gosh, how much more powerful would it be if HR really understood the consumer of a
Yeah,
product, whether it's a service or a
yeah,
actual product. That adds another layer of capability that HR can bring.
yeah, it's huge. Yeah,
Well, I mean, especially because we touch over the course of our careers, we touch almost every part of the business,
every
and
part.
and so being able to sit down in any organization and have at least a foundational understanding of what they're doing,
Yeah.
why they're doing it, and the value
Hmm.
that they add,
Yeah.
it's it's interesting because I saw an article. I was like, oh, the new CEO is now coming from the CHRO seat, and I think that if we've done our job right over our career,
Yeah.
we should be
Yeah.
CEOs. shouldn't just
Yep.
come from finance or COOs. It should
Yeah.
be CHO should be in that succession talk as well.
No, I mean we are in such a brilliant vantage point. I mean the role we have is unlike, I mean, the CFO is probably the only other role. I mean, the CFO, CEO, and the CHRO is kind of like that executive triangle, which is one of my new favorite terms, right? I mean, we're the the three executives that have that unique vantage point across that sees
Everything.
the organization in that way. And yeah, I mean, the CHRO needs to know the business inside and out and upside down. And you you understand the DNA of an organization as a CHRO in a way that I don't think any leader does, because you have to and you actually have to understand like we said, the financial part of it, and you have to understand the mechanics of all of the actions of the behaviors that create the ups and downs and the value or the deficits, or I mean, we really see it in a way that other people don't.
Yeah. Well, just this is just reinforcing one other reason
Yeah.
why you and I connect because
Yeah.
I love the executive triangle analogy. I've said that those three roles are like a three-legged stool,
Yeah.
and if you don't have a strong CHRO, you got a two-legged stool, and it
Yeah.
doesn't really stand.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, I think part of this dialogue is the challenge of the HR function is in today's business world, unfortunately, um, the function struggles still today in 2025, almost 2026, with full acceptance, and not in all cases, but in many cases, struggles to um, not to be accepted, if you will, but I think we're unlike any other function in the corporate world, we're struggling to find what is our, well, we talked about it in our opening. What should our place be? What should our definition be? How should we define ourselves? No other function talks about themselves that way. Finance
no,
isn't saying, well, how should we define ourselves? And does the CEO, welcome us to the table? No other function is talking about themselves that way. Why should HR be talking about themselves that way? And why is that still happening today? I mean, when is that going to be just come to an end, and it's just going to be defined as core essential to the to business?
you know, it's really fascinating because I think there's two sides to this coin. One is you have the misconceptions of the CEO and other C-suite, but then you also have what we've just talked about, HR's mindset and how they approach the business.
Hmm.
So we can help HR shift its mindset, especially
Yeah.
if they have great leaders like you that can help them. The question then becomes how do you flip that script on the C-suite so that they are accepting and of I think it's almost more they're putting aside the negative in you know perspectives and perceptions of HR and being tactical and only caring about
Yeah.
annual surveys and performance reviews and 401k or benefits, right? I mean that's
Yeah.
what they think. Just get me my people, get me my benefits and my
Yeah.
pay, and leave me alone.
Hmm.
Um, so how do you do that? I know
Yeah,
one of your recent roles, you
yeah,
had a CEO that you had to really push.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, so first of all, let's just like take a moment to acknowledge the HR function is so diverse in
Yeah,
its scope.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, to have a function that does everything from think about your 401k, or even let's even go even more technical. You talk about like onboarding a person and like scanning in a driver's license. Like I literally walked through, my HR suite one day, and I have a compliance person there that's like scanning in someone's driver's license, right? And making sure that they're you know ID is checked or whatever. Two, we're planning, succession for the C-suite, or, whatever. I mean, that's a huge scope of responsibility in what we do for an organization.
yeah,
Um, and so, I mean, that in the function is struggling with like what is the design of this like complex function, and how do we define this thing that's supposed to do all of this stuff, right? From 401k up to the most strategic, important things for an organization. And then, to your question around, how do you explain that and kind of have that relationship with a CEO who, might focus on the, oh, well, you're just, kind of processing that transactional stuff, and, think
yeah,
about it only in that way versus, you know, not really understand or see, that other stuff. And so I always talk about, when I look on LinkedIn and I hear this constant dialogue around this is the model of HR, no, this is the model of HR, like that conversation really actually drives me a little bit crazy, because actually I don't think that there is a model of HR. I think that there definitely is a list of things that HR does, but there are just HR, and I mean, the business you're in has to define kind of, how HR is. I think if the conversation is anything really big, maybe we have to decide, truly are some of those administrative functions different and someday, kind of parsed out and led in a different way from, some of this more big strategic stuff, like the succession and the talent strategy and that kind of thing. Um, because I don't know that, you ever kind of, I don't know, get them separated in the mindset of people in the organization from your kind of administration to your strategy. Does that make sense?
yeah. No, I mean, I do get frustrated with Ulrich and some of these folks. Like, oh, look, we're going to
Yeah.
evolve the.
Yeah.
Well, they just put pithy names on what HR is does and is doing, and it,
Yeah.
I mean, finance has some of the transactional, the accounts payable, accounts receivable, but they are a lot more, uh, you know, controlled and focused on what they do versus HR. I'd never actually thought about how wide HR is. I mean, we touch employees
Yeah.
across every aspect of their career.
Yeah, and where you might have your COEs or your talent practice or your HRBPs, central or decentral, all of that, that's not defined by a preset model. That's defined by the business you're in.
Business, yeah, no, that's right.
And I think so, I mean, I just feel like one of the things that, maybe is challenging about us is that, we're a function that talks about ourselves maybe a little bit too much.
Yeah.
Again, I'll use, this is just not something that, you would ever see the finance function talking about, like, what's our purpose? Uh, Finance squarely knows what the purpose is, and HR squarely knows. I mean, the fact is, we squarely know what our purpose is. So
Yeah.
let's get down to it and let's make sure that we're telling our story. I think that's the biggest problem is we spend so much time talking about how we should be organized and we don't spend enough time telling people what they should expect from us and how they need to be working from with us and then just go and do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got me thinking because in the large organizations, um, finance and accounting, you may have a chief accounting officer and a chief financial officer.
Yeah.
Um, uh, some organizations might have a chief learning officer if it's a heavy learning kind of
Yeah.
organization. But it is kind of interesting
Yeah.
that why wouldn't you have a um, I don't know, a chief operation, kind of that people operations officer that's
Yeah.
taking care of all of those
Absolutely.
core people processes, and then you have your chief people officer, chief talent officer, chief
Yeah.
HR officer that's really focused on the strategic elements of talent
Yeah.
and growth and succession, and driving the
Yeah,
business.
because I do think that I mean there's an identity crisis here, right? And I do think that it's hard for people to kind of understand, oh, the people who process my paycheck, or if that's where payroll fits, are the same people who are going to be key to, mapping my career here and, deciding the future succession for the career and sitting at the table with the board or, whatever it is. That truly is, who it is, and or people who are, going to participate in the business strategy conversation. Um, and that for some people, based on their prior relationships with HR, if they've come from an organization that has been very rules-based HR, which so sadly and so unfortunately still exists. And I beg anybody who's in HR to please reassess and to, look and understand that rules-based HR and all of those fundamental things do not create healthy organizations. And it's not good for us as a function. That's not where the business world is. That's not, good for anything right now. That is part of the past. That is in history. That is
Yeah.
gone in the past. So if there's anything to reassess, those are the things, that are hurting us, not only as a function, but in the business world as well. And I think I just think that there's just, those some of those old things that, people are still seeing as part of HR that if they still exist or if they were part of a prior experience, they're having a hard time letting go. And right now, one of the things that I see a lot on social media, and it breaks my heart, is, there's been unfortunately a lot of, impacts in corporate America across really big companies. I mean,
Yeah.
the company I just came from, we had a lot of um, um, team member impacts, and Amazon, we've seen them all, right? We've seen the big
Yeah.
companies with the team member impacts. And HR is the evil function of the organization that has to execute. on these things, then yes, HR has to execute on these things. But I will tell you, as an HR leader, and at least the HR team that I've led, these processes are done with, compassion, and the HR people who, have been on my teams, execute with heart and understanding that, people who are impacted in these things, are people with lives, and and do it with, utmost respect, and, very, aren't doing it on behalf of an evil empire and that type of thing. So it's a hard role that we have to play as HR. But the dialogue out there most certainly is, oh, I don't know who would choose to be in that horrible profession, and, those are horrible people, and, so that it's a battle, right? That we kind of fight because of some of the essential things that we have to conduct in an organization.
Yeah, we definitely have to fight multiple fronts more so than any other organization.
Yeah.
I do want to kind of go back to one thing, and I want to reinforce this with our listeners. If you grew up in a policy compliance based organization and you are now leading leading your HR team, similar compliance policy uh, bureaucratic kind of HR structure,
Yeah.
be open for that feedback and change your mind, because that's what's holding. I think that is the first place that we need to get out of our heads. And like, no,
Yeah.
some of that's important, yes, but it is such a small portion of what HR does today that it needs to be de-emphasized on the enterprise.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually just reading, I was late at opening my mail, and I was reading the November, December issue of Harvard Business Review, which cover to cover, this issue is fantastic if you haven't read it.
Haven't.
It just is absolutely fantastic. There's one article in there about how organizations operate and how the whole concept of organizational systems. That's one fantastic article. But the other one is around a CHRO of a company and how she was reevaluating a newly implemented performance improvement plan, and realizing that it might have actually been the wrong decision to implement it, and was using data and did a presentation to the CEO, and officer of the organization, and you know that you have a responsibility to make a decision on investments in the organization, then you all have the responsibility of making the right decisions on who are the people who you're going to invest in. And so then that's a really, really important decision. So it's not just a process, and it's not just data that gets collected and then sits on a shelf. It is constantly used.
Yeah.
And you should feel really, really, really confident in that data and never question. I know the organization that I just came from, when we did not only succession, but we did the business continuity or emergency, kind of succession. And when somebody left the organization, we never missed a beat. We were able to, within a moment, decide, are we going to do, uh, is this a person that's a certain position on a list? Are we going to, retain them in a certain way? If not, who's next on the list? And we were able to move within hours
Yeah.
because we had a plan. We
Yeah.
went right to that plan. We never had to then had we never had to create the plan in the moment of the act. The plan was always there, and it was always fresh, and we always had confidence in that plan. And that's how you move at the speed of the business.
And that is that's a great model to have from a strategic HR perspective. Your
Yeah.
people, you've done the assessment, you've done the development, you know who's stepping into what role when necessary, and you have that depth of an organization.
Yeah. And this is where you build the credibility with the leaders that you're sitting at the table with, because going to the scenario where somebody who, somebody might leave the organization who you unfortunately might not want to leave the organization. That's a stressful situation, but the continuity of the business is really important. When you can sit there as a partner to them and you have a solid plan and they have confidence in that and they know that and you can help them execute and you can remove the stress and that they're like that's what's important, right?
Yeah.
And that's where that trust and that's everything. And that's how you get invited to the seat for the dialogue and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you don't know where to start, just start with a talent review. Simple.
Yeah,
Most leaders can understand a simple 2x2
yeah,
matrix,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it'll take a couple of iterations for them to
yeah,
really sink in if they've never done it before.
yeah,
But if you understand who you have in your organization from a talent perspective, that can then drive succession plan
yeah,
and
yeah.
developments and stretch assignments and all of that other stuff.
Yeah, we had, my last organization, we had a talent principle where you know your people as well as you know your business.
Yeah.
And
Ooh, that's great.
vice versa. And you need to at the drop of a hat be able to say, I have this need. Who do I have? And it shouldn't require 2 or 3 meetings with 5 people in it, to figure out what it is. You just know.
Yeah.
And that's where the value add is.
Well, Lindsay, I think we can go on for hours,
We
but
could.
unfortunately, our time is up.
Yeah,
Hopefully, you'll come back
I
and
will come back.
we'll continue the
So much
conversation
more to talk about.
for sure.
Yeah,
Um, but Lindy, I want to thank
yeah,
you so much for joining us
yeah,
today. You brought
yeah.
such clarity to this topic.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. This is something I'm super passionate about, and I can't thank you enough for inviting me and doing what you do and bringing this topic to a platform like this and just really appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Well, look, if you've enjoyed today's
Yeah,
episode and it sparked something in you, uh, please share it with another HR leader who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, follow the podcast for more of the conversations because we're talking about people who are rewriting the playbook on modern leadership. So thanks for being here with us. Until next time, keep leading, keep learning, keep putting the pieces together. We'll see you next time.